But if you are sick and tired of this, you don't want to live this way anymore, you don't want to be treated like this, you don't want a world where people are being treated like this, then you need to get serious and get with this revolution.
That was Bob Avakian from the film of his talk, B.A. Speaks Revolution, Nothing Less. A film that can change how you see the world and what you do with the rest of your life. And as you may have guessed if you didn't already know, it's what inspires our name and what we do on this show every week. My name is Andy Z. Today is Thursday, February 18th, 2021. I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm the host of the show, and I want to welcome you to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. You are in the right place to get with this revolution, a revolution to emancipate all of humanity. This is the show where you need to be if you are sick and tired of all this system puts you and billions of other people like you through every day. This is where you need to be if you don't want to take any more of the shit this system puts on the people of the world. Where you need to be if you refuse to believe this world is the best that could be and you aspire to something far better and far different. Stay tuned. You are in the right place. Every week, every show, we bring to you the stark reality of why nothing less than an actual revolution can solve the existential problems that must be solved if there is to be a future for humanity. Every week, we bring the possibility of how humanity can get free. How through the hard but liberating road of actual revolution we could forge a radically new and far better world with the leadership and road to get there blazed by the revolutionary thinker and leader Bob Avakian, who we call BA. This week, as we strive to do every week, we aim to provoke, to challenge, to inspire you, to remove the blinders from your eyes, to see beyond the surface grime and the surface shine of this system. We aim to wake and shake you to see that it is not fate that causes so much needless suffering, dehumanization, destruction, and death. That must only be endured or escaped by clawing your way out over other people, let alone suffering for the reward to come in some other life that never does come. We are not peddling snake oil or some short-lived empty relief from the surface shine of the goodies that can come to you possibly in the U.S. that they hold out to you all the time through advertising, keeping you trapped in a rat race to survive or get ahead, only to find that you are becoming a rat. No, at the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, we challenge you to see the world as it actually is. We infuse our show with the thoroughly and consistently scientific method and approach to know the world as it actually is in order to radically change it, to emancipate humanity. That is the breakthrough of the new communism developed by Bob Avakian. Whoa, that's a lot of big concepts. Not just revolution, but actual revolution. Not just communism, but the new communism. Not just a scientific method and approach, but a thoroughly and consistently scientific method and approach. That's a lot, it's different, and it's new, and we'll help you through it. But look, we need to free the world from the dog-eat-dog nature of the capitalist imperialist system we live under. Oh no, that's two more big words and big concepts. We need to get rid of and get beyond a system that forces us to be each out for ourselves, only for ourselves. We need to be rid of a system that runs by exploiting people and the earth itself, and where all the beautiful variety of life on this planet is being destroyed by this capitalist imperialist system. And this requires a radically different way of thinking, of knowing, of struggling together for the truly radical change that is needed. It is what we bring to you every week. I know and we know this is different, it's against the grain, it's not, it's all good, or take care of me, feel good crap that's out there. But let me tell you two things. Number one, there is a way out. And number two, there is leadership for that great liberating struggle. That there is a way out of the killing confines and madness is a tremendous thing. That there is Bob Avakian, BA, a leader who has not only made a breakthrough in applying the scientific method and approach to all of society, and especially to making revolution a leader who has developed the strategy for how to seriously prepare today for how such a revolution could be made when it's possible to actually win. And more than that, he's written a constitution for a new society that would not just be a world where you would want to live, but would put humanity on the road to truly liberating and emancipating all of humanity. That too is a tremendous thing. And as you watch today's show and past and future episodes of the Revolution Nothing Less show, you will come to experience B.A. Bob Avakian for yourself. And with that, I want to conclude the introduction to today's show, where we began with Bob Avakian saying and inviting to all who are sick and tired of all that is the world today to get with this revolution. That statement that began our show today is part of a segment from the film B.A. Speaks Revolution Nothing Less, titled "The Revolutionary Potential of Those Most Oppressed Requires Scientific Leadership," which is what I've been speaking about to open today's show.
It does the master people no good to feed them pablum and to condescend to them and think that they're not capable of understanding the reality that they're caught up in and how they can fight to radically change it. In fact, I'm in favor of going up to some of these, straight up to some of these hardcore youth out here right now and telling them, okay, look, if you like things the way they are right now, if you like the conditions they got you in, if you like the way they do you, if you don't give a damn about people all over the world being done the same way you're being done and treated as less than human the way you're being treated, then go on. I ain't got nothing to say to you. You go on and do what you want to do. But if you are sick and tired of this, you don't want to live this way anymore, you don't want to be treated like this, you don't want a world where people are being treated like this, then you need to get serious and get with this revolution. I'm not for babying the masses of people. They don't need more social workers. They don't need more condescending saviors. They need people to go straight up and tell them this is what we have to do to get out of this mess and to liberate not just ourselves, but everybody throughout the world that's in the same kind of mess we're in. Now, Basics 3:17 speaks to the fact that many people don't believe that the youth caught up in selling drugs and all kinds of other mess can become revolutionaries and can play a key role as part of the driving force of this revolution. Basic says, yes, they can do this. But it goes on to say, not as they are now, and not without struggle. They weren't always selling drugs and killing each other, and the rest of it. And they don't have to be into all that in the future. Ask yourself, how does it happen that you go from beautiful children to supposedly irredeemable monsters in a few years? It's because of the system and what it does to people, not because of unchanging and unchangeable human nature.
So that was Bob Avakian from the film, from his talk, B.A. Speaks Revolution Nothing Less. The revolutionary potential of those most oppressed requires scientific leadership. He's really speaking there about for whom is this revolution made and who needs to make it. The most oppressed here and around the world. And what do they need to get free? They need scientific leadership. In this film, Bob Avakian says those the system has cast off, those the system has treated as less than human, can be the backbone and driving force of a fight not only to end their own oppression, but to finally end all oppression and emancipate all of humanity. And that's going to speak to a good deal of the theme of today's show. But moving on to today's show, I want to welcome you once again to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, one of the few places in this country that's not in a deep freeze. My name is Andy Z, and I'm here with Sunsara Taylor, back from several months on the East Coast, escaping the cold, and it's great to have you back. So let's bring some revolutionary heat to our audience.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be back here with you, Andy, in person in the studio in Los Angeles. And my heart and my concern for the future of our planet and humanity goes out to everybody in the deep freeze right now. So yeah, let's bring some revolutionary heat.
We've just come through what was really a critical historic moment in U.S. history, an attempted fascist coup to overturn the election which resulted in the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump in the U.S. Senate, where last week the Republican Fascist Party acquitted him. This is again demonstrated through shocking footage of gallows, of a huge cross erected on the mall in front of the Congress, and a Confederate flag rampaging through the halls of Congress, that we have a full-blown fascist white supremacist party as one of the two ruling class parties in this country. Bob Avakian, in his seminal New Year's statement, "A New Year, the Urgent Need for a Radically New World for the Emancipation of All Humanity," has said, the reality has to be confronted that as expressed through this election, nearly half the country has passionately, aggressively, and belligerently embraced what is represented by Trumpism. The unavoidable truth is that this country, the much proclaimed shining city on a hill, is full of fascists in the government at all levels and in large parts of society as a whole, end quote. So after we go through the whole episode, first up in today's show will be a very brief commentary that I'm going to make about the decisiveness of this message, Bob Avakian's New Year's statement, to understanding what underlies this fascism, what the fundamental problem humanity faces in the world today, and what is the solution.
And then for the rest of the show, look, it's Black History Month, and so we're going to deal not only with the history of Black people in America, but the present day reality and the future, and what the future needs to be. So we're going to get into this in three ways in this episode today. First, we have a great animation. We're going to bring you part of the New Year's statement from Bob Avakian, where he deals with the question of the position and role of Black people and how this has changed in the last 40 years and what is needed. So we'll bring you that. We have a killer segment, another segment from the BA Speaks Revolution, Nothing Less talk, that is going further at the question of what kind of leadership, building on this theme of scientific leadership, what kind of leadership do we need to get free? So you'll hear from BA directly there. And then finally, we're bringing a new installment of the American Crime series. And this is going to be dealing with actually an enormous episode of the criminality of America towards Black people, which is very little known about, and in shocking proportion to how horrific it is and how much it concentrates. So this will be America Crime number 71 on the Colfax Massacre. We'll end the episode with that.
That massacre was actually hidden, erased from U.S. history until relatively recently. So look, I'm going to get going and start with this commentary on, a brief commentary on the New Year's statement from Bob Avakian, and then we'll move into the substance of the statement in the segment that you just spoke of. A new year, the urgent need for a radically new world for the emancipation of all humanity. That is the title of Bob Avakian's New Year's statement, and it delivers. Just think for a moment about the extreme situation we face. Catastrophic devastation of the earth, its climate and air. Dams bursting in India, wiping out whole villages. Migrants fleeing the growing life-stealing deserts of northern and sub-Saharan Africa. Millions suffering terribly in Latin America. And all of this fueling a tremendous flood of refugees risking life and limb around the world just to survive. A deepening, embedded white supremacy that continues to thwart the aspirations, the struggle, and the lives of Black people in this country. And the statement begins with the unprecedented event in U.S. history of a fascist attempted coup to overturn a legitimate election, broadcast to the whole world, live, and then again in a case made during the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. a coup attempt that brazenly invoked the imagery and the rhetoric of the Confederacy of Slavery, fueled by the most insane, fantastical lies and conspiracy theories. Bob Avakian says in the opening section of this statement, the reality has to be confronted that as expressed through this election, nearly half the country has passionately, aggressively, and belligerently embraced what is represented by Trumpism. The unavoidable truth is that this country, the much proclaimed shining city on a hill, is full of fascists, in the government at all levels and in large parts of society as a whole, end quote. All this and more is dug into in this statement by Bob Avakian. The case is made for why it is intrinsic, which means built into the system we live under, and the stakes revealed in his statement why there is an urgent need for a radically new world, and that also reveals and opens up the potential to bring forward a movement to bring this new world into being. And most of all, this is a call for the emancipation of all of humanity. It is a call that needs to be answered by you, the viewers of this show, becoming involved and digging into the road forward to get into and to follow Bob Avakian, to engage this statement as an entry point into his full body of work. The world was stunned by the rampage through the Capitol, even as it was essentially called for by Trump for weeks and months before. In the actual event, Trump's incitement of deadly violence against politicians of both ruling class parties who had defied him came close to being carried out as the organized mob careened through the Congress. Early in his statement, B.A. calls on us to recognize that the sharp divide between Democrats and Republicans, quote, involves contention over how to uphold and pursue the interests of the capitalist-imperialist system and rule by the capitalist class. It does not represent the fundamental divisions in society and the world, nor the fundamental interests of the masses of people in this country and in the world as a whole. Nor can the profound problems confronting humanity be solved. In fact, they can only get worse within the confines of this murderously oppressive and exploitative system and the chaos and the destruction it will continue to unleash on a massive scale so long as it continues to dominate the world. Later in the statement, B.A. quotes the Miami Herald columnist Leonard Pitts, who wrote that the results of the 2020 election, quote, strips bare all the glossy claims about who we are as a country, underscoring the fact that in any meaningful sense, we are not one country at all anymore, but two sharing the same borders, end quote. The question is why? What has given rise to this? What continues to fuel this? What is to be done about it? All the pundits from the mainstream media, all the progressive websites, look at this from within the electoral divide between the Republi-fascists and the Democrats, which reveals that their thinking is trapped and will lead you to be trapped within the same dynamic, the same situation, the same treadmill that will only get worse. The same dynamic we have been in for 4 years and 40 years and even more. Bob Avakian writes, to understand why we are confronted with the situation we are, it is necessary to not merely respond to and in effect be whipped around by what is happening on the surface at any given time, but to dig beneath the surface, to discover the underlying mainsprings and causes of things, and to arrive at an understanding of the fundamental problem and the actual solution. I think it is worth reflecting on this dynamic of being whipped around, either by the latest vicious insanity and duplicitous lies out of the mouths of fascists, or the breathless reporting by Rachel Maddow and other wannabes on progressive websites, or by the illusions and delusions of a New Deal or a New Green Deal, or pushing Biden to advance the people's agenda, let alone Biden's own delusion of bringing the country together. None of this is founded in the real world. B.A. goes on to say what he means by, quote, dig beneath the surface to discover the underlying mainsprings and causes of things and arrive at an understanding of the fundamental problem and the actual solution. BA says, quote, "This means coming to the scientific understanding that we are living under a system, and what that system actually is, capitalism-imperialism. Working to grasp the deeper relations and dynamics of this system, and how this is setting the framework for how different sections of society spontaneously think and react to events in society and the world, and what is the possible way forward to transforming all this in the interest of the masses of humanity and ultimately humanity as a whole." End quote. To get into this, we're going to bring you one dimension of this that he speaks to today, on the changed and changing situation of black people in this country, and how on the one hand this is a driving factor fueling the white supremacy of the fascist Republican Party, but more fundamentally, what it will take to uproot this oppression and for black people and all humanity to get free. So from this statement, Bob Avakian's New Year's statement, we're going to bring you now a part of that statement that's being read by one of the members of our Revolution Nothing Less crew. So watch this.
Since the end of World War II 75 years ago, the situation of black people has dramatically changed. These changes were initially based in increased mechanization and other transformations in agricultural production and the economy overall. They were driven by a powerful upsurge of struggle of black people, wrenching concessions out of the ruling class in this country that was anxious to maintain its image as the champion of democracy and leader of the free world, especially in its confrontation with the Soviet Union for a number of decades after World War II. As a result of these and other factors, black people's oppression is no longer centered around brutal exploitation in the rural South, in conditions of near slavery, and in some cases actual slavery, backed up by Ku Klux Klan terror, but instead involves a situation where masses of black people are segregated and concentrated in urban areas throughout the country and subjected to systematic discrimination and continual brutality and murder by the police. Over the past several decades, due to heightened globalization and automation of production, interacting with continuing discrimination, there has been the elimination of a great deal of factory employment, which provided black men and some women with better paying jobs in the urban areas. At the same time, as a result of the civil rights and black liberation struggles of the 1960s, early 70s, and other factors, there has been the growth of the black middle class. But there has also been an increase of the so-called underclass, concentrated and contained in urban ghettos and more or less permanently locked out of regular employment in the formal economy. Unable to provide a positive resolution to acute contradictions bound up with these changes, unable to end systemic racism, which involves degrading discrimination against even economically better off sections of black people, unable to integrate large numbers of black people into the formal economy, the ruling forces in society have responded to this situation with mass incarceration of millions of black males and growing numbers of females with arrests, trials, convictions, and sentences, embodying yet more discrimination and injustice, and by unleashing and backing systematic police terror, which is especially directed against black people in the inner cities, but can target any black person, anywhere, at any time. The attempt to brutally enforce law and order, given that a more just solution is impossible under this system, heightens the volatility of this whole situation, leading to further upheaval, including completely justified and righteous protest and rebellion, which in turn is seized on by fascist forces in promoting their grotesque white supremacist portrayal of the masses of black people as criminals and uncaged animals. The fact that with all these changes, and regardless of who is occupying the seats of power, systematic discrimination and murderous oppression has persisted, has led some black people to conclude that the Democratic Party is the problem, since it has consistently sought the support of black people, but has repeatedly acted against their interests. Even as the Republican Party has become the vehicle of overt and aggressive white supremacy, it is true that the Democrats, and not just the Republicans, have presided over the oppression of black people. But what is the actual reason for that? And what is the real answer to it? The reality is that white supremacy is built into this system of capitalism-imperialism, and neither of these ruling class parties could put an end to this, even if they wanted to. The answer is not rallying to the fascist Republican Party, or trying to play these bourgeois parties against each other, or embracing black capitalism and begging for a better seat at the table, all of which will only reinforce the existing system of oppression and perhaps benefit a few at the expense of the many. The answer is revolution, and establishing a radically different society that has the basis as well as the orientation to uproot and abolish white supremacy and all oppressive relations.
All right, so that was an excerpt of the New Year's statement by Bob Avakian. A new year, the urgent need for a radically new world, for the emancipation of all of humanity. And just like Andy said, that was an application of science, going beneath the surface to examine what is driving the changes that are confronting black people and their position in this country right now. What is it about the nature of capitalism-imperialism, this system that we live under? And BA goes into this more deeply. He applies the same method as you go forward in this statement to the changed conditions confronting women here and around the world, to other major social questions, and later he gets into what kind of revolution we need. What's the vision for a radically new world? What's the constitution for the new socialist republic that he authored? There's so much science and so much leadership in this statement, and we want to invite you. At the end of the episode, we'll tell you more about it, but we want to invite you to dig into this more deeply. Yes, through our episodes that will continue to examine this today and going forward in this season, but also in Zoom into the Revolution study sessions, wrangling sessions. So you can register for that, dig into this together with others. We'll tell you more about it at the end of the episode. But as soon as you start thinking, even for 5 seconds, about what it would really take to make a revolution, to overthrow this system of capitalism, imperialism, to replace it with something radically different, to end the oppression of black people, to emancipate all of humanity, the question gets posed, what kind of leadership do we need? And this is a controversial question for many people in this era that we live in right now. People think they don't need leadership. People have all kinds of ideas about this. Well, BA speaks to this directly with science and a lot of heart. And the same speech that we opened the episode with and that we take the name of our show from, the Revolution Nothing Less speech, the BA Speaks Revolution Nothing Less speech. And so we want to show you a section where he speaks to this straight up. What kind of leadership do we need?
Something that's out there that I wanted to speak to in terms of leadership and my own leadership in particular is I know this goes on in whispers, or some people say this among themselves if they don't always say it out loud. Especially among people who've had the bitter experience of being betrayed by leaders, in particular great white fathers. They say, BA, why do you have to be white? Why couldn't you be black or something? Now, I used to get this back in high school. Back in the days at Berkeley High School where I went to school, my black friends would often say to me, Bobby, that's what they used to call me back then, Bobby, it's a shame you're white. You would make a really great brother. Now, I've always considered that the highest of compliments. But here's the thing. If I were black, I wouldn't be Latino. If I were half black and half Latino, or part black, part Asian, part Latino, and part Native American, and still from America, I wouldn't be from the other parts of the world that are dominated and plundered by American imperialism. I wouldn't be Bangladeshi or Iranian or Arab, for example. If I were male, I wouldn't be female. If I were female and straight, I wouldn't be gay, and so on, and so on, and so on. And where does this end? And really, what is this all about? Once more, we're back to the question, what is the leadership we need? Well, that depends on what we're striving for. It's back to the big question, why are we in the situation we're in today? Can anything be done to really change this? And if so, what is that change? And how can that change be brought about? To put it another, perhaps simpler way, what is the problem and what is the solution? That tells us what we need to be aiming for, and therefore what kind of leadership we need. Now, as a matter of fact, what I am today is in very important ways and to a very great degree the result of the influence of black people in their struggle, although there have been other influences that have also played an important part in my development. But the most important thing is this. At a certain point, I made a leap to becoming a revolutionary and a communist. And that is a leap that people, more and more people, have to make who want to see an end to all this madness and want a whole new liberating reality for humanity. If we want a world where never again will another youth be shot down by marauding, murderous police, where never again will a woman be raped or brutalized, where never again will masses of women and men be treated in any way as less than fully human, where never again will children die in huge numbers in their infancy, and never again will generation after generation face the same killing madness. If we want a world where all this is finally ended, along with 1,000 other outrages that seem so much a natural part of the human condition, but in fact are totally unnecessary at this point in human history, we need communist leadership, the most advanced, seriously scientific, and far-seeing communist leadership we can get. Many people also say, well, if BA is our leader, the leader of this revolution, then we need to be able to see him and talk to him directly. But the point is, what someone stands for and where this will lead people. What will happen if that person's ideas are taken up and fought for? That is the fundamental question, not whether you can see somebody and literally touch them. And there is the fact, let's be real here, revolution, if it's going to succeed, is going to involve millions and millions of people. And while it is a great thing to have the chance to be among and talk to some of these people who will be part of this revolution, still there are bigger things that have to be kept in mind, including how the powers that be look at and seek to deal with revolutionary leaders.
That was an excerpt called What Kind of Leadership Do We Need? From Bob Avakian in his historic speech, BA Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less. Now we're going to link to the full speech in the description of this YouTube, and we encourage you to watch the entire thing. And I just want to say straight up, when you saw that, BA speaking about what kind of leadership we need and who is this for, and what is it all about? And even more, if you get into that entire speech, you will see no one is providing the kind of leadership BA is providing for humanity right now with the heart, the science, and the vision. and really struggling with all of us that if we want to get free, we have to take up this same method, this same strategy, and we have to go out and fight for it. So we want to say, again, straight up, if you want to get free, if you want to be part of contributing to the emancipation of all of humanity, you need to get on the road of becoming a follower of BA. This is what this show is all about. And this is what we're inviting you into. And if you're feeling that, or you want to learn more about that, or you have questions about it, and you want a little bit further, we really want to encourage you to go. We did a segment last week, and we'll continue to get into this as we go forward, on an article that's on the website, revcom.us, called Bob Avakian, for the liberation of Black people and the emancipation of all of humanity, that really goes through a lot of Bob Avakian's development and commitment to this key question, the liberation of Black people, a strategic question for this revolution, and how that fits into the emancipation of all of humanity. So definitely we want to recommend that to you. And finally, I want to, just as a way of introducing this final segment for our episode today, I want to emphasize a further point that BA has made. He said, look, if there's going to be any fundamental change for the better, if we're going to contribute to this in any kind of meaningful way, all of us have to confront the true nature and history of America and its crimes. And this is actually what inspired revcom.us to begin doing the American Crime Series, where we've documented the 100 top crimes of America in history, and why we've started to make these really compelling part of the Revolution Nothing Less show. So this week we are bringing you, for Black History Month, and to meet this demand of confronting the nature of this country, the American Crime number 71 on the Colfax Massacre of 1873 and the Supreme Court approval of racist terror.
Here's something to think about. How is it that during the 90 years from the end of Reconstruction to the 1960s, thousands of Black people in the South could be publicly lynched and the federal government not lift a finger to stop the lynchings or punish the perpetrators? It's not like they didn't know what was happening. The National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, has to date documented 4,400 racial terror lynchings between 1877 and 1950. Historical records show that in 1893, for instance, one lynching occurred in the South every 40 hours, and the count is ongoing. But how were these murders documented? Most of them were announced in advance in local newspapers, openly and proudly. And then, of course, there were the postcards, sold and collected throughout the country so widely that the U.S. Post Office finally tried to ban them in 1908. But did the federal government do anything to stop the century-long reign of terror? Not a chance. Why? There is an answer, and to find it, you need only travel back in time to the years following the Civil War known as Reconstruction, and the tiny town of Colfax, deep in the heart of Louisiana. And from there, head on over to the United States Supreme Court, whose landmark 1876 decision gave the seal of approval to a reign of terror in the South that lasted nearly a century. This was a unique moment in American history, when laws and constitutional amendments were passed granting former slaves the democratic rights of citizenship. As Bob Avakian describes it, quote, during the brief period of Reconstruction, while the full promise of these rights was never realized, there were significant changes and improvements in the lives of Black people in the South. The right to vote and to hold office, and some of the other constitutional rights that are supposed to apply to citizens of the U.S. were partly, if not fully, realized by the former slaves during Reconstruction. And in fact, some Black people were elected to high office, though never the highest office of governor in a number of southern states, end quote. Along with those rights, laws were passed that made racist terror a federal crime. But from day one, those laws, fought by former slave owners, Confederate veterans, and a significant number of white people in the South, were rarely enforced. In Louisiana, which had been the most brutal of slave states, estimates are that over 1,000 Black people were murdered in racist terror attacks during the 4 years between 1868 and 1872. Then came the sharply contested 1872 election for governor of Louisiana, won by William Pitt Kellogg, a supporter of Reconstruction. Following his victory, a mob, led by the white supremacist Crescent City White League, stormed and occupied the State House in New Orleans, attempting to overthrow the election. Is this starting to sound familiar? Knowing what was coming, African Americans in Colfax, which was the seat of Grant Parish in central Louisiana, took refuge in the courthouse. Then on April 13th, Easter Sunday, they were set upon by 300 White League and KKK members armed with rifles and a cannon. Following a brief gun battle, the freedmen surrendered. Historian Tom Army describes what happened next.
The attackers lined up those who surrendered outside the courthouse and then called each freedman out of line by name. As they came forward, they were shot. Some had their throats slit. The remainder were hanged. 165 freedmen were either killed in the fight or executed. 3 white men were killed in the attack.
Historian Eric Foner described the Colfax Massacre as, quote, the bloodiest single instance of racial carnage in the Reconstruction era, end quote. When no state charges were brought against the murderers, the federal government tried 9 of them under the new civil rights laws with, quote, interfering with people's right and privilege to peaceably assemble together, end quote. Only 3 were convicted, and the case eventually made its way to the Supreme Court in 1875. The case was the United States versus Cruikshank, and in March of 1876, the court threw out the convictions of the 3 murderers on the grounds that the Bill of Rights only protects Black people from violations of their rights committed by the federal or state government, not by racist mobs. You heard that right. The United States Supreme Court declared the federal government had no jurisdiction over racist mobs committing mass murder. And with that, the civil rights laws and amendments of the past 10 years were essentially nullified, and the historic attempt by the federal government to grant democratic rights to Black people was over. By 1877, the Army was withdrawn from every one of the southern states, and white supremacy was free to rule by terror and murder for decades to come. Truth be told, the complete emancipation and integration of Black people into American life was never really the goal of Reconstruction. After all, who would pick the cotton that was so central to the growth of capitalism if the millions of formerly enslaved people were truly free? So sharecropping, essentially a slavery under a new name, became the order of the day. As Bob Avakian explains, quote, real freedom for the former slaves would have enabled them to resist the severe exploitation that was visited upon them, and thus would have made the reintegration of the Southern economy into the larger society much less profitable for the ruling capitalists. So the Ku Klux Klan was unleashed in full force and played a brutal role in defeating and subjugating the freed slaves and progressive whites, often in bloody battles, end quote. And besides, as capitalism flourished and the newly united country expanded west, the Army had other needs to tend to.
All right, so that was heavy, Sunsara, the Colfax Massacre, 1873. It's difficult to watch, but we have to watch this, and we have to see what it is that this country has done. This was actually a turning point in U.S. history, another turning point where there was a possibility of could Black people be fully integrated into society, absorbed into it, be able to govern themselves, be part of the fabric of the society. And the answer was, as Bob Avakian has said, is a resounding no, because to do so would tear apart the fabric of this country, and that still remains true today. And the legacy of the Cruikshank decision by the Supreme Court and the Colfax Massacre was hidden, hidden for 100 years. And so this is something that I think is important for people to see.
Yeah, I just want to say that the more you learn about this country, actually, if you really confront it, the more you learn, the worse it gets. And none of this prettifying that goes on so much of the time. Oh, there was some founding sins, but we're moving past. You haven't learned this. You don't get taught this. You don't confront this, and then build a foundation on this. This is the essence. And I'm so struck by watching it and the legacy of it, and from the Supreme Court. I was really glad we were able to do that.
Yeah, and I want to thank David Zeiger, who has created all of the American crime series that we have on our YouTube channel and that we've shown on this show. And I hope to have him on the show in the next month or so. And we do want other people to go read the American crime series. And if you're a filmmaker or aspiring animator, take one of these up, write to us, and maybe you can make a segment as well.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to appreciate in that American crime, it's very brief, but it's really important. There's an image of the white supremacist mob back in 1873 and then the white supremacist mob this January 6th in the Capitol.
Sound familiar?
Exactly. And it's this living connection of this Confederacy is rising again in this fascism we see today. And this is addressed in a lot of Avakian's work, but it's really spoken to. I'm going to use this as a segue. It's really spoken to in this New Year's statement that BA put out that we've been talking about through the whole episode, and that we promised at the end we would let you know how you could get into some study, some discussion, and some formal wrangling in this to get more deeply trained in the scientific approach of it, to go into the substance of it, and to actually be part of a force collectively at whatever level you're ready to be part of it, and taking this out into society and changing people's thinking and what they're doing, because this has to be confronted today, and we need to get to a world beyond it. So we do want to invite each of you, all of you, to register for the Zoom into the Revolution seminars that the Revolution Tour is going to be leading. They're 4-week sessions. We also have one-time seminars if that works better for you. What you do is you write to us at Get Organized for Revolution Tour. We're going to put that on the screen, getorganizedforrevolutiontour@gmail.com. Write to us, let us know that you want to be part of these Zoom into the Revolutions. We'll find one that fits your schedule and brings you into a group where you can be part of this at whatever level you're entering in.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up our show for today. We just want to leave you with this. If you want to get free, you need to get with what we've been talking about on this show. And we'll see you next week, Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern time. So, Sunsara, good to have you back here in Los Angeles.
I'm so glad to be back with you in studio. Listen, we'll be back next week, and definitely spread the show in the meantime.